warm welcome. We are broadcasting live from the Global Council for Aerospace, Defense and Deep Tech Innovation, a premier global platform dedicated to accelerating innovation, strategic partnership, and cross border collaboration across aerospace, defense, and deep tech industries. Today, we are witnessing a profound transformation in the global strategic landscape, breakthrough in space technologies, autonomous systems, satellite intelligence, advanced manufacturing, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and defense innovation are defining the future of global national security, industrial competitiveness, and global economic growth. Yes, alongside this technical revolution comes a significant challenge. Governments, defense organizations, investors, and enterprises are navigating an increasingly complex ecosystem filled with fragmented technologies, evolving regulations, and rapidly shifting geopolitical priorities. Visionary founders and breakthroughs, innovators often struggle to access the strategic partnerships, institutional capital, and global market opportunities needed to scale their solutions. Promoted by the Global Council for the Promotion of International Trade and supported by a global network of policymakers, defense leaders, researchers, investors, and industry experts, Global Council for Promotion of International Trade was established to bridge these gaps and create a trusted ecosystem where innovation can move seamlessly from concept to deployment. We are more than a platform, we are a catalyst for collaboration connecting governments, defense organizations, space agencies, investors, enterprises, startups, and research institutes to accelerate commercialization, strengthen sovereign capabilities, and build the technologies that will define the future. Operating across key strategic regions including India, the Middle East, Europe, North America, Africa, and the Asia Pacific. Global Council for Aerospace Defense and Innovation is committed to forecasting partnerships that drive technological resilience, economic growth, and global competitiveness. Today, as part of our visionary interview series, we are exploring the ideas and innovations shaping the future of aerospace, defense, and deep tech. Joining us is a leader who embodies exactly what it means to build with vision, purpose, and transformation impact. Please welcome our distinguished speaker, Ramakanth desai. Ramakanth Desai is a visionary business leader, technology strategist, and innovation inventor with more than 4 decades of global leadership experience, spanning business management, digital transformation, mergers and acquisitions, and international market expansion. Throughout his distinguished career, he has held senior leadership positions at some of the world's leading technological organizations, including serving as president and co-CEO of the IT services businesses at Happiest Minds Technologies and Senior Vice President of Business Strategy and Global Sales Operations at Wipro. Over the years, Ramakanth has successfully led businesses generating revenue of more than 500 million USD, managed global teams over 3,000 professionals, and played a key role in shaping large international deals and strategic acquisitions. His expertise spans deep technology, business strategy, cross border partnerships, global market access, and enters an enterprise scale transformation. Today, as the CEO of Tattva Innovation Labs, Ramakan advises startups and small and medium enterprises on scaling growth, expanding internationally, and building sustainable innovation ecosystem. He is deeply committed to forecasting collaboration between industry, academia, startups, and governments to accelerate the future of aerospace, defense, and artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. Ramakant, thank you for joining us today and contributing to the future of aerospace, defense, and deep tech innovation. It's an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Sushma, for that warm introduction. Okay, life is a 360-degree journey. Okay, I started my career in 1983 with the most premium defense organization in India, which is the Hindustan Aeronautics. Okay, and I think over the last 2 years, again, I've started getting into the aerospace and defense industry more as an advisor and an investor and a consultant. So that is, just a brief introduction about me. So doing too much ado, I'll just give an overview of the entire defense ecosystem, defense and aerospace innovation ecosystem, essentially the startup ecosystem in India. Okay, and how, what are the technologies which are shaping it, what are the global trends, okay, and what are some of the use cases, and including one of the latest example to learn from, which is essentially the Ukraine war. Okay, and what is the areas which Indian startups can focus, and how long is the journey? I can I'll briefly spend 2 to 5 minutes or 10 minutes, depending upon the nature of the topic, on each of these topics, and try to close my overall ecosystem overview in the next 30 minutes.
Sure.
So, good morning, everyone. Uh, if you look at the entire innovation ecosystem in defense and aerospace, it has basically started with the Defense Research and Development Organization India, with GRDO, which has whole lot of labs. Okay, I think approximately there are 50 to 60 research labs, and also we had a lot of in-house research and development units in organizations like Bharat Electronics and Hindustan Aeronautics. In fact, I joined the Avionics Design Bureau way back in 1983. Okay, which was essentially focused in design and development of radars and other stuff. So in that sense, the innovation in defense is not new to India. But however, the latest technology advances and the kind of pace with which the technology is changing has the innovation has caught up a little bit more, mostly in the startup and the private sector. Okay, I would say mostly from 2015-16 onwards, ever since government has started liberalizing the entire defense ecosystem for private participants to play an effective role. Okay, if you look at the landscape, national security is a very wide and dynamic area, because earlier it used to be mostly on the land. If you remember 1971, at best it was on the land and on the air, sea to certain extent. But now the warfare has shifted beyond land and sea and air. It has moved to space and cyber, and I don't know tomorrow what will be the medium around which the wars will be fought. Already information warfare is a big thing, which is part of cyber warfare, but I think the two will get separated soon. So, so the scope is expanding hell of a lot. That's one. Second thing is the asymmetric warfare is increasing. That means even a small nation can challenge a big superpower, like what we have seen in Ukraine, and even in case of Iran-US conflict, is something which we will tend to see a lot more in the future. So space and cyber have started playing a very influential role, and with each war, new challenges are coming up, and nations have to innovate to achieve their objectives. Okay, asymmetry both in terms of firepower, asymmetry in terms of cost, which I just briefly referred to, and then traditional warfare models are getting challenged, and but this is also one more domain which is cutting across technology. For example, if you take pure artificial intelligence in retail, it is mostly in and around ITIS and at best few business processes. Whereas the defense technology is cut across material science, the digital, AI. It involves a lot of physics, chemistry, geography, terrain mapping, propulsion. A whole lot of things come into picture. So it is not just the buzzwords like artificial intelligence and things which we hear. But everything has started playing a role: artificial intelligence, space, cyber technologies, material science. Everything has advances, especially in the material science. A lot of advances are happening. So startups need to be focused, not lose sight of the end use and the infrastructure challenges. And this is another typical characteristic of any defense system, because the environmental challenges will be high. A system which works on the ground will not work in the air, and a system which works in the air will not work in the underwater sea, or it doesn't work at different altitudes. A system which works in simulation doesn't work at different level of altitudes. So things like that. Similarly, communication challenges will be, you won't get high bandwidth communication from remote areas and some mountainous regions. So some of those environmental challenges play a hell of a lot of role, in defining the characteristics of the system to be designed and defined. From an Indian perspective, export opportunities are on the rise. Indian exports have crossed almost $4 billion now. Okay, and I'm sure they will continue to expand. Now, let us look at the value chain, which I briefly referred to in my introduction itself. But however, so if you look at the value chain, the base materials which are required for the global defense market, essentially extraction and processing of steel, aluminum, composites, and now new crystals are essential, which are essential. There are few players, and and they kind of garner the market share. Similarly, components and subsystems. Okay, discrete parts, systems, avionics, propulsion components, sensors, things like that are integrated into the larger platforms. Okay, and there are again players there which are listed there, players like Pratt and Whitney or Thales, things like that, L3 Harris. And then there are prime contractors who are essentially the design integrators, assembly, testing of complete defense platforms like for aircraft, ships, armored vehicles. Nowadays, drones and missile systems, and obviously the space shuttles, etc., come into the picture. So you see a whole lot of guys like Boeing, Airbus, and of course even HAL, things like that play a significant amount of role there, including Dassault systems, etc., from whom we import Rafale. Then integration of command and control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance has become very important. Reconnaissance is become very important, because unless you do reconnaissance, it's not that easy. Similarly, cyber security, and then logistics are becoming extremely important, especially from a safety perspective. Okay, that's where robots play big role, and then software defined systems and autonomous systems, etc., etc. And then last but not the least is the support services, which is essentially the maintenance, repair, overall training, simulation, supply chain logistics, both food and also the components required for the frontline warfare. All these so that is the whole value chain of the global defense market. Okay, so nobody can have a monopoly, but at the same time, you should have partnerships and certain core competency to be able to play the role which is needed for the national security. Then, if you look at if you look at the global defense spending, the defense spending is also increasing. For example, India itself, has seen approximately 70% increase in military defense expenditure over the last 8 to 9 years. Similarly, United States around about 54%, and China has the second highest growth at 72%. So the defense expenditure world over is now, I think, even Southeast Asian nations and Middle Eastern nations and Eastern European nations have started realizing that national sovereignty is very important, especially Middle Eastern nations who have money, and the Southeast Asian nations also. So from that perspective, I think the defense expenditure globally is only going to increase. The military expenditure has increased approximately 51% globally, from 1.7 to 2.7 trillion. And defense prioritization and increased expenditure is the norm of the day. Okay, these are all decadal figures like 2014 to 2024. I'm sure now, if you take the latest figures, it would have gone up a little bit more. I thought I'll take validated figures instead of just quoted figures in the public domain, just like that. Okay, so now, how has the Indian defense policy has changed? Indian defense policy has been increased to the foreign FDI limit has been increased to 74% under the automatic route ever since this Atma Bharat Abhiyan was launched, so that and also to leverage the defense offset policy. Ordnance Factory Board has been dissolved, and now 7 PSUs have been given complete autonomy. 60% of capital acquisition budget reserved for domestic procurement, which is very huge. So now the domestic procurement has increased considerably. And then the production policy of 2018 has set ambitious targets. Okay, and then there is a new initiative called IDEX, which is essentially Innovation for Defense Excellence, which takes problems from the three forces: Air Force, Navy, and the Army, and then floats those problems for private sector or other public sector units to solve it. Okay, and so that way an ecosystem of startups, MSMEs, has been facilitated to participate in the defense innovation. That's why I told, sorry, there is a small typo there. It's not FY 2564, it is FY 2526. The defense exports have reached almost $4 billion, which is like 35,000 crores. Okay, and or probably slightly more. And I think that will continue to increase. And India has also taken out almost some 15,000 defense items. Is listed in the region defense portal for indigenization. Okay, so that is a significant. It's called positive indigenization list. It's not PIL, which is public interest litigation. Don't confuse with that. This is the positive indigenization list, managed by the Ministry of Defense. And the India's defense policy has to be seen along with the space policy, the semiconductor policy, the India AI mission, and also India Research Innovation Fund. A lot of funds have been allocated, and a lot of opening has happened in the space policy, in the semiconductor policy. A lot of incentives are being given, and that's why we see a lot of indigenous efforts both in the semiconductor space and private participation in the space, and things like that. Okay, so essentially, the Ministry of Defense has started opening up. Still, there is quite a bit of control, not control. I would say more like ensuring that the indigenization efforts do not go against the national interest. Okay. So now, what are the emerging segments? If you look at the futuristic segments, some of things which are coming into the, and also current. Space has started playing a big role. For example, during the Operation Sindoor, almost 10 ISRO satellites operated round the clock as a strategic force multiplier. Okay, they provided target imagery, real-time communication, tactical communication, which is very important, precise missile and drone trajectory tracking. Because you needed to execute swift cross-border strikes, which is very important. Same happened with Starlink in Ukraine war. Ukraine used Starlink heavily for round the clock strategic communications, okay, imagery, etc., etc. So space-based systems are becoming an integral part of the air defense. Similarly, artificial intelligence in defense operations, okay, is in the command and control space, in the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. I'm sorry, I keep mispronouncing this word. And then cyber defense, things like that. It is becoming very, very important. Okay, and autonomous weapon systems are becoming important because essentially, if you look at key drivers, which are essentially risk mitigation for the personnel. Suppose there is, robotics are getting used, especially for say, mine detection, both underwater sea as well as on the land, and also in terms of logistics, transport, etc., etc., and especially fueled by the drone swarms, which is very becoming important. Surveillance and early detection of the drone swarms and loitering munitions is becoming important. So autonomy is the driver behind both the drone swarms as well as the loitering munitions. Okay, and in fact, autonomous self-guided missiles, etc., etc., are coming into picture. Okay, and integrated air and missile defense, which is very critical. That's what we have seen significantly play in the Iran-US conflict. Iran used this fairly effectively, and even we saw that even in India in the Operation Sindoor. Okay, missiles and armored UAVs increasingly prominent in the military strategies. Okay, even in Russia and things like, especially in Israel, Hamas, and training and simulation services, simulation solutions. Okay, there need to be high quality training solutions. Yesterday, I was speaking to one of my old colleagues in HL. She was referring to how training and simulation has become extremely important, even in case of things like helicopter, etc. So there is especially growth in advanced technologies has provided the need for immersive training for complex scenarios, which is very important. Okay. Now, let us go, if we drill down a little bit more, it is not just mere digitalization, but what militaries can achieve in the end objectives, like say detection, mobility, survivability, lethality of the weapon, okay, speed of the whole attack. So sensing, detection, and attack, targeting, those become extremely important, and how the technologies can play important role. Okay, and so we already touched upon this, and then quantum technologies are going to play important role. Hypersonic systems are emerging, and novel materials are emerging, especially to make the both the drones and the aircraft lighter as much as possible, and also to prevent to kind of anti-jamming solutions embedded into the warfare. Okay, into the missiles, or say into the drones and aircraft, etc. Recently, we have seen one Google's article where they are discovering new materials using new AI tool called Genome. Okay, and we don't know how these new crystal structures, okay, are going to change the entire warfare scenario, and they help in developing next generation computer chips and batteries and energy things, etc. So I think that's what I was telling you. Entire science is coming to play into picture in defense. Okay. So now let us deep dive a little bit more into each one of them. Okay. For example, if you look at autonomous combat and logistics vehicles or transport, are kind of transforming the entire ground operations. How are they transformed? Say, for example, navigation algorithms are coming into picture, integration of computer vision, sensor fusion is integrated. If you look at the Ukraine war, I mean, the way they have integrated some of these things is amazing, actually. And also reinforcement learning. Why reinforcement learning is becoming important, especially in unknown terrains and unknown complex terrains. To avoid obstacles, reinforcement learning technologies are becoming important, because you need to do a lot of tactical maneuvers without direct human control. Okay, and sometimes even the frontline armed personnel may not be able to visualize, which the autonomous systems can visualize, can detect, etc. And autonomous combat vehicles, which I already talked about, which integrates light detection and ranging, as well as radar, and multispectral cameras are becoming important. What is a multispectral camera? A camera embedded with multiple, which can capture multiple spectrums, and hence environmental perception becomes a lot more clearer. Okay, AI driven planning, these things to essentially for route optimization, for evasive actions. And then high fidelity simulations are becoming important. What is a high fidelity simulation? Essentially, you need to mimic the real world battle simulation before you can enter the battlefield. Okay, so training in high fidelity simulations is becoming important. Uh, and also they help in empowering these systems for adopting for the dynamic battlefield situation. And unmanned ground combat vehicles, they carry heavy weapons, and they should be unmanned. You cannot put them manned, because they could be targeted by the opponent. So they need to carry heavy weapons, sensors, as well as payloads for high risk environments, which is very important. And we'll also see some advances in underwater sea drones, etc., when we come to the drones. And autonomous logistics convoys, essentially for supporting the front operating bases, which could be airfield base or an army base, things like that, and so that you can free the troops for more core missions. Okay, these are becoming extremely important in the warfare. Now, if you also go to the next advances, drone systems. Okay, drone systems are evolving from intelligence and surveillance to coordinated swarms. And coordinated swarms is like a collective bees. Okay, and then they can kind of influence multi-domain. Okay, which is like air, land, and maritime, and cyber, as well as other targets. So that is because drones have started becoming multi-domain effectors. Similarly, multi-agent systems, decentralized control is emerging, so that the drones can operate autonomously. without need for remote control and operation. And also the AI itself is becoming cooperative AI and artificial intelligence, which enables the drones to execute missions collaboratively without constant operator interventions. So new algorithms are coming from that picture, which are essentially swarm intelligence algorithms. Okay, swarm intelligent algorithms are essentially the kind of interactions which provide intelligent problem solving, okay, or optimizing and path finding, etc., etc. So they act like biological collectives. This is a very new concept derived from the biological collectives. Okay, for dynamic retasking, and then the drone swarms will retask, and then for maintenance, etc. Similarly, edge AI processing. How much of AI processing can you move to the edge so that almost real-time image recognition and target identification can happen? Okay, so that the communication will not become a bottleneck in terms of decision making processes. And also mesh networking protocols are emerging, essentially decentralized self-healing network layout so that the forwarding data can be efficient across multiple loops, multiple hops. Okay, so essentially the communication can be proactive, reactive, and hybrid. So from that perspective, mesh networking protocols, play an important role. Okay, and what are the operational implications because of these drone systems? Okay, loitering munitions and coordinated attacks to overwhelm the defenses. I know I'm going a bit slow. I think I'll kind of move fast. This most of this information will be available in the slides, and if you want, you can scan through that. That's why I have made them as full sentences instead of just bullet points. If it is bullet points, the talk over becomes very important. But if it has full sentences, people can read and understand the missed out points. And then advanced drone sensor payloads for essentially for understanding the military camouflage. Okay, why drone sensor payloads becoming important essentially for intelligence, surveillance, and this is only for understanding the military camouflage. Okay, and also hyperspectral is becoming important, which I already talked about. So key advances here essentially in the sensor payload systems are hyperspectral imaging, and then symmetric aperture radar, essentially for the miniaturization of the for all weather surveillance. And then there is what is called as a SIGINT, which is essentially a combination of combat intelligence and electronic intelligence, essentially for all weather surveillance. Okay, and things like that, and also for targeting. These are some of the new defense technologies which are becoming very, very important. Okay, and also layered sensor coverage becoming important. What do you mean by layered sensor coverage? Essentially, you have outer layer, which is essentially an early warning, long range using radars and satellite images and ELINT sensors, which is essentially electronic intelligence sensors. And then you have the middle layer, which is essentially perimeter sensing, which are more ground-based acoustic sensors, which sense based on the sound and the sound frequencies, and then fiber optics, etc., etc. And then also wide area multispectral cameras. Multispectral cameras are becoming important. And so overall, the layered sensor coverage was even used by India during Operation Sindhu. Okay, so that the target identification becomes a little bit more important using high resolution vehicle cameras and then laser range finders, etc. Things. So these are some of the advances which are happening. And then next generation tactical communication, which is essentially for resilient connectivity. I'll just touch upon one or two points here, which is essentially what is called as a cognitive radios are kind of getting used, which are essentially alter the transmission parameters based on the environment. So the cognitive radios can do a little bit of a dynamic calling. Okay, and then based on next generation tactical communication, sensing the spectrums, and then spectrum management, sharing, mobility, etc., etc. So those are becoming very important. So a few other things like what is called as a multiple input, multiple output, MIMO, beamforming antenna arrays, which are for essentially enhancing the signal strength. Beamforming is essentially antennas will facilitate directed wireless signature, okay, wireless signal to the target. So it's something like that. So that's what it is all about. Then quantum key distribution for securing the communication, things. So these are that's why next generation tactical communication becoming very very important. And now autonomous maritime systems. This is very key. The of late undersea and maritime domains, underwater, with advances in advanced submarines and mines, distributed naval assets. Autonomous underwater vehicles is becoming are going to play a significant role. Unmanned surface vehicles, okay, both for navigation, surveillance, and things like that. Okay, so you need to do simultaneous localization and mapping, and you need to have long duration power systems to provide low risk maritime capabilities, etc., etc. Because if the power systems degrade, then it becomes if the power consumption is high, your substitutes have to go, and it's a logistics nightmare. So what is happening? Essentially, artificial intelligence-driven sonar processing, which essentially classifies the contacts and detects anomalies in the cluttered seabed environment. Acoustics play a significant role in the naval domain. Similarly, underwater communication, acoustic modems with adaptive frequency hopping, and then thermal energy-based systems for increasing the operational duration of the autonomous underwater vehicles, things. So persistence undersea surveillance is becoming important. Mine countermeasure operations are becoming important. Decoy and electronic warfare operations are becoming important. Undersea infrastructure security, okay, continuous inspection of undersea cables and energy pipelines. I think these are some of the challenges which need to be addressed in the naval security, apart from just the cyber security and other aspects, and integrated missile systems and aircraft carriers, and a whole lot of that which the traditional forces are already taking care. I'm touching upon the more new advanced technology based initiatives which are needed for either for detecting decoy signatures or electronic attack modules, and then enemy targeting systems, things like that. What are the other deep technologies which are impacting defense? Okay, I'm not going to touch upon everything. AI powered logistics is becoming important. Quantum sensing is becoming important, and then cyber resilient avionics, additive manufacturing in manufacturing using 3D printing for rapid decentralized production of replacement parts. Ukraine has used additive manufacturing big time in its defensive systems. Why I'm talking so much about Ukraine more than Russia, you may wonder. Russia was a superpower. To take on superpower like that, Ukraine had to reinvent itself heavily, and that story is a very amazing war defense story. Okay, we'll cover that as we go through the presentation. I already touched about space and satellites. I'll probably not get into this little bit more detail, except that cyber security, cyber warfare, information warfare is also becoming important. And now, Ukraine. Ukraine is a living lab for defensive warfare. Okay, what did they do? They captured the entire battlefield feedback, driving the design cycles measured to weeks rather than months. The way they defended, first 12 months they struggled, but within 10 to 12 months they got their act together, and then they used what is called as a quadcopters, okay, to strike the targets so that they can reach almost 1,000 kilometers. They used naval drones to stop Russian control over the Black Sea. They used a layered low cost air defense, including acoustic sensors and interceptors. You see, all the technologies we talked about, they have put into real use. Okay, Ukraine's industrial base, defense industrial base, has grown almost 50x in 4 years. An amazing amount of progress. Okay, I already talked about the digital battlefield system, tying the drones, sensors, AI-driven mapping. Commercial drones have been repurposed for providing intelligence. Okay, and then engineering groups were voluntarily formed to convert the consumer hardware labs into military equipment design labs. Okay, hundreds of small drone factories came into picture. A lot of decentralized units were used. Okay, so that the distance between the battlefield problem and engineering is fixed, much faster. Okay, so Ukraine is an amazing story. I'll tell you, they used cheap drones for destroying armored vehicles. Can you imagine using $1,000 drone for destroying an armored vehicle, which would have cost probably $400–500 million? Mid-range strike drones regularly flying back and forth to hit oil production targets, export terminals of Russia, factories of Russia, and then they used what is called as a first person view or FPV drones to detect to defeat Russian jamming. Okay, they used a thin cable using radio signals. I think it's a very interesting technology. One can read a little bit more about it. It's essentially around fiber optics. And then they developed a complete software digital backbone, what is called as a Delta system, to integrate the data from thousands of sensors, radars, acoustic locators into a unified real-time tactical picture. Even India used this, little bit, a kind of a layered digital backbone during Operation Sindhu. Okay, sky map. That's why our defenses are pretty strong. Okay, and when we attacked with precision. Okay, most people don't realize the kind of technological integration which was seen in the Operation Sindhu. Okay, for various reasons. Okay, we'll not get into the global politics here. And then they used Ukraine used what is called as a sky map platform, essentially multi-layer threat detection. Okay, around acoustic signals. Even acoustic signals and acoustic sensors were used heavily by Iran also recently. And then every incident mapped. That's why they could even find, detect stealth bombers from US, Iran. Okay, every incident mapped so that commanders can get the picture, and then an incident-based intelligence system was developed for striking the target. And then drone feedback, which I already talked about, integrated. And then they were sharing with other units in real time. In a real warfare, sharing units, the information with other units in real time becomes very important. So it's almost journey towards an automated warfare. Then they used a platform called Avengers AI to kind of giving the footage of 12,000 pieces of Russian equipment. Then 9 pounds is hardly anything. Okay, those kind of drones, strings, interceptors, were amazing amount of technological use was done by Ukraine to defend its own. Otherwise, it's a small country, against Russia. It's so difficult to stand, right? Though India is a strategic supporter of Russia, and of course it maintained good relationship with Ukraine also. I'm just looking at this from a pure technology and a strategy perspective. It's not that I'm supporting Ukraine or Russia in my talk. Please don't get me wrong. Then what this means for startups in defense. Okay, so that is very, very important. These are becoming all the technologies which are talked about, from advanced drone sensing to electronic warfare to autonomous maritime dominance. These are all becoming the new needs. Okay, unmanned autonomous systems, things like that. So, what should be the next step for defense startups? Identify niche technology gaps with military capability needs. Map your core technologies, whether in AI, robotics, or advanced materials, directly against published defense capability priorities. Okay, which is very, very important. So, it's very important to study what IDEX is doing. Okay, what are the various problems which they are listing? Or even if you're in exports market, there are a lot of agencies like, say, Pillar 3 or NATO ka Diana or DI, things like that. So they are publishing their defense problems, and there are some companies which are working with them as a partner. So I think you need to work with them to do that. Okay. Essentially, the startup should focus more around the defense priorities. Okay, I'm not getting into specific examples of startups where I'm partly or fully involved in due to confidentiality reasons. It will be against the Ethics and also confidentiality clauses are there. Defense is a very sensitive topic, so one has to be careful when one says something in public domain like this. Okay, so I'm not getting into specific startups where I'm working with, but though I cover the entire startup landscape through the course of my discussion. Okay, and then develop use cases in such a way that they can be used both for the defense as well as advanced civilian markets. Okay, otherwise financial resilience become important. Okay, that's very important. So, and then partner with military innovation agencies. This is extremely important. Otherwise, you will be working on problems and or you think that, oh, technology can solve this, but technology solution is only limited. Okay, unless it can result in a desirable outcome. You have to integrate with open architectures in mind, so that tomorrow plug and play into other existing systems or logistics using open standards become easy. Okay, and then follow the export control regulations. Cyber security compliance are very early, because if you want to bring this late into your design stage or architecture stage, it's going to be extremely difficult. And if you want to embed them as plugins, it will not work. So you think about some of these things from day one, and build advisory boards with operational and procurement experts, which is very, very important. Unless you get the actual end user or a program manager from the domains, as part of your advisory board, your product development will not meet the realistic field deployment. Please mark my words. Okay, and pursue strategic pilot programs with clear operational metrics. Design your demos with which can show the outcomes very clearly. Things like that. So, what are the key signals from the Indian defense ecosystem? There is a huge demand for edge AI. There is demand for autonomous drones and anti-drone systems, AI-powered simulation, combat training, and some advances in the jet. I'm not going to read or not to delve on these things, because that's why I have left full sentences for people to read and then understand. What are some of the defense startups doing in India? Agnit Semiconductors, they have come up with a what is called as a next generation wireless transmitter. Okay, 1 minute. I'll just next generation wireless transmitter using GaN technology. Essentially, gallium nitride. It uses an advanced semiconductor material that outperforms the traditional silicon. Okay, and hence it is essentially useful for shrinking the size of chargers, or things like that, powering military defense equipment things. Lens, essentially, they have come up with reality-based defense solutions, essentially mixed reality solutions. They enhance the situational awareness for troops, okay, with augmented virtual reality, assisting in mission planning, simulation, etc. Okay? That's what they are doing. And they have also filed for almost 15 national and international patents. So these are other important. You better start filing for patents. Okay, they are planning to upgrade an existing portable air defense system of India. Okay, things. Similarly, Big Bang Boom Solutions, they have developed an anti-drone technology. Okay, advanced combat systems. Constantly, this is another interesting company. They are working. They are looking at exporting to South Korea, Australia, Singapore. So it's good to study what they exactly are they doing on the partnership front and how they are going about their exports. They're also working with DRDO. Essentially, it's a telemetry receiver. And IRA is a very underwater drone. It's essentially for the naval thing, for naval inspections, mine detection. You remember in the recent Iran-US war, mines. Iran said that they have planted a lot of mines. So US had to deploy technologies to detect the mines. Still, they have not been fully successful. Okay, so underwater mines are going to be a real thing, especially in key places like Strait of Hormuz, or say Malacca Strait, and Red Sea, Black Sea, whatever you can call it. Okay, all these strategic choke points in the global naval scenario. Okay, underwater surveillance, real-time underwater intelligence, these are becoming important. Okay, flying ways, they develop drones. Okay, Garuda Airspace, so they have raised a lot of money, and then they do real-time reconnaissance. Okay, it's like some of these terrorists do, what they call as recon. That is essentially reconnaissance. Okay, essentially you go and figure out the battlefield in a real sense, where to position, how to position, where not to position. Use a lot of unmanned drones and autonomous vehicles for it. Okay, so things like that. Idea Forge essentially for high performance drones for surveillance, and then they are able to carry design drones with advanced payloads, which is very important because you need to be able to carry higher payloads for border surveillance and counterinsurgency operations. Okay, things like that, and then Aerospace is involved in a lot of building components. You remember my first value chain model where I talked about raw materials, components, and things like that. They are in that second slot. Okay, cold working. They use and then new spaces. Okay, they have developed swarms. Okay, unmanned air vehicle swarms. Essentially, looking to expand its portfolio in Japan, Middle East, US, etc., etc. Okay, so that's what you again. It's an interesting thing to look at what exactly they are doing in terms of Sagar defense. Sagar defense for underwater again, for naval defense applications. They have developed platforms for autonomous patrolling, and then mine detection. Okay, and then target technologies, uncrewed surface vehicles. They do okay for predictive maintenance and things like that. They're essentially their USVs have capabilities for coastal surveillance, and navigation, and performing missions without human interventions. Okay, things. So these are all some of the things. This company Winveli I shortlisted because they are partnered with Czech Republic to see. So it's good for other startups to see what exactly they are doing, and then things like that. Underwater robots by Zera Robotics. So I'll not get into line by line detail. These are essentially some of the startups. There are a lot more other startups in India which are doing good work, but I think this is not enough. We need probably 100x of what current startup ecosystem is. So there is an opportunity for 100x multiplier in this field. Okay, provided you have a sharp value proposition, work with the right stakeholders. Some of the case studies of AI in battlefield deployments. Okay, CNNs have been used, essentially convolutional neural networks, for aerial imagery, reinforcement learning, which essentially in uncharted territories it becomes very important for autonomous swarm behavior. GANs essentially for gaining synthetic low levels scenarios, low light scenarios, etc. So these are some of the things, some of the AI technologies which are being used. Okay. And then what could be the new things? I think I'll skip this slide. I'm already running out of time. Indian defense tech landscape. If you look at, essentially they are focused on drones and anti-drones, intelligence surveillance, and then military hardware to certain extent, training and simulation. These are the four quadrants, and these are some of the investors who are backing. So when you are trying to develop a startup or go after raising the money, don't go after everybody. Just focus on those investors who will be ready to invest with you. Okay, and these guys know the domain well. They know how to navigate the system. They'll help you with connections. These are all very important for startups. So time is very right for entering white spaces. I'll just summarize. Government policies are encouraging. Middle East, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe countries would be good targets. Europe is a good thing for partnerships because there are a lot of good technologies, especially in material science and other areas. There are a lot of good technologies. So partnerships, partner with them, try to develop new solutions along with them. Think of the value chain. Look at your resources. Spend time only with investors who are focused on this sector. Don't waste your time. Okay, focus on manufacturing capability. Very, very important because anything lightweight, midweight, will have a higher weightage in the defense. It's so difficult to carry higher payloads either into the air or in the army anyway. Okay, so you need to be careful about that. Leverage educational institutions because educational institutions will be, very much inclined to work in the defense domain, and you'll also that way encourage a little bit of patriotism in the younger generation, and then form global partnerships. I'll just close my discussion here. and then I'll leave probably 5 to 7 minutes for Sushma to ask me questions. Sushma, it's all yours now.
Yes, thank you. So your video will is off, I think so.
Oh, you should have told me.
No, I thought you like you off by yourself. You don't need to disturb. So I thought,
Oh, no, no, no. I should have shown the slides.
yeah, you are showing slides, right? So I thought you don't want to see.
But the slides were seen?
Yeah, slides were seen.
Oh, then good. That's
Your video was off.
oh, that's it. No problem.
Yeah, I don't want to disturb. Actually, I texted in the chat, but I think you didn't.
No, I was in my flow. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't see chats, and even my phone, I cut it off. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you, Ramakanth, for sharing your insights with us,
Ah.
your perspective on business management and digital transformation and the international market expansion. Thank you so much for your insights. So I'd like to ask you just a few questions or a couple of questions. So my first question is, with more than 4 decades of experience leading global businesses and driving large-scale transformation, how do you see artificial intelligence, machine learning, and emerging deep technologies reshaping the aerospace and defense industries over the next decade?
Oh, they'll play a major important role in the decision-making processes. I already talked about them, how
Yes.
Ukraine has used it, what are the kind of algorithms which are being used by the some of the Indian startups already. Okay, in autonomous systems, artificial intelligence is going to play a heavy role. Okay, you need to integrate the, you need to develop, I think India needs to develop its own language models for defense. Okay, I'm sure the embody will be focusing on that, because once you have your own language model, then security becomes higher. Okay, I think they're going to play a hell of a lot of role in the near future, no doubt about it. Okay, in the material discovery to assembly to cyber security to cyber warfare, in the space communication, integration of these things, real time information, it's a massive domain. It's a massive domain, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, sharing for those insights. So, moving to my next question. Having worked extensively in global business strategies, mergers and acquisitions, and international expansions, what are the biggest challenges startups in aerospace and defense face when scaling globally, and how can they successfully overcome these barriers?
That's a very good question, Shushma. First of all, there will be a lot of barriers from a national security policy perspective in any country. Okay. For any country, whom they want to allow, whom they don't want to allow, those things become important. So, from that perspective, I think the guys have to study their national defense policy, their national space policy, their national, manufacturing policy very carefully before they start, jumping into the bandwagon straight away. That is one thing. The second thing is local partnerships are extremely important. It's always better to go with a local partner because there will be a lot of legal hurdles and bureaucratic hurdles you face when you start focusing on exports. Okay, that's why whenever I touched upon some of the startups which are doing exports, I asked startups to study their business model, how they are doing or what they are doing exactly. Okay, that is very important. The third thing is you need to understand their domain needs, which is very important. For example, there is no point in going and selling drone technology to countries like Poland and Ukraine now. They're so advanced. Okay, they don't need you. Okay, you need to learn from them. Okay, but if you go to Southeast Asia or say Middle East, yes, you can do a lot more wonders there because essentially they need that, and none of the countries like say Saudi Arabia or UAE or Qatar, they had defensive systems which could address the drone swarms or the Shahid Meji, drones from Iran. Okay, and it became so difficult for them. Okay, so I think these countries need defense exports. So from that, and some of the Eastern European countries who are not as advanced as say, or even the European countries who are not as advanced as Ukraine and Poland in terms of drone technology and autonomous systems, is going to be important. Okay, and also to understand, see, war is no more firepower. War technology is strategy now. Okay, unless you have technology, you will not be able to do a strategic warfare. Okay, So from that perspective, I think it is very important to understand that how this technology can help in solving a particular military problem which the end user has is very, very. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing wonderful insights on it highlights that successful innovations requires not only like technological excellence, but also strong leadership and global partnerships and clear like commercialization strategies. So moving to my final question. The Global Council for Aerospace Defense and Deep Tech Innovation aims to build a trusted ecosystem connecting like innovators, governments, investors, researchers, and technology leaders worldwide. Based on your experience, what role can initiatives like Global Council for Aerospace and Defense Innovation play in accelerating deep tech commercialization,
I think
strengthen?
you should play a supplementary. Just 1 minute. I'm having some small throat issue. Just give me a minute.
Sure, sure, no worries.
Okay. So, you should play a supplementary role to IDEX. It's very important to partner with IDEX. Okay. Understand the defense ecosystem, form a council kind of a thing with a little bit of military experts as well as technology experts and some business guys like me. Okay. And then bring out white papers and bring out things where the startups can focus and start giving importance to startups, okay, in terms of achievements as well as their target markets, facilitating the local. For example, I know you have a Middle Eastern office, you have an office in Europe and things like that. So facilitate local interactions, facilitate interaction with local business councils. I think those are all the things which you should do. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for your wonderful insights. I think that gives our audience a lot to reflect on. So, Ramakant, thank you for sharing your
Thanks,
experience and your
Sushma. It
expertise.
was pleasure talking about it. Okay. I'm sorry my video was switched off, but that was not intentional. Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that,
Bye.
that's fine. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, keep innovative, keep collaborating, and together let's build a stronger, more secure, and technological advanced future. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
us
you.
today.
Bye.
Yeah. Have a great day. Bye bye.